Just imagine picking up a stranger on a deserted highway, only for him to turn and call you by your name. Not just your name, your full name. And then he tells you where you live. Word for word. That happened to me 3 weeks ago, and I still can't explain it. I've replayed that night over and over, wondering if I missed something, some logical detail that could make it all make sense. But every time I go back to it, I end up in the same place. The same fog. The same empty stretch of Route 47. The same moment when everything started to feel wrong. Let me start from the beginning. It was a Thursday night, just past midnight, and I was driving home from Greenwood after a long day of field inspections. I'm a structural engineer, boring work, mostly, but it pays well. That night, I'd been stuck on site longer than expected, and by the time I hit the road, my phone was at 3% battery, and my GPS had already died. The sky was ink black. No moon, no stars, just a thick layer of cloud that made the world feel small and enclosed. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel of light through the fog, and everything beyond that was swallowed up by the dark. The road was empty, as it always is past 10 on Route 47. You can drive for miles without seeing another pair of headlights. I was running on fumes and caffeine, the kind of tired where you start to feel your pulse behind your eyes. I remember turning the radio knob just to have some noise, but it was all static. That weird, whispering static that sounds like someone breathing on the other end. Then I saw him. He appeared just past the mile marker, a figure standing on the shoulder, half hidden in the mist. He wasn't waving, wasn't moving, just standing there, his thumb pointed up. I should have kept driving. Every instinct in me said not to stop, but I did. I still don't know why. As I slowed, the fog shifted, and my headlights lit his face for the first time. He looked young, mid-20s, maybe. Dark jacket, jeans, backpack. Clean cut, harmless enough. But something about him felt off. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on. Just this quiet sense that he didn't belong out there. He walked up to the passenger door, and I rolled down the window halfway. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "North," he said. His voice was calm, steady, like he'd rehearsed it. "You're going that way, right?" I hesitated. "Yeah, Asheville." He smiled. "Perfect. That's right near your place." I frowned. "Sorry, what?" He leaned closer, and that's when I realized he hadn't asked. He'd stated it. Like he already knew. "Your place," he said again, his voice softer now. "On Pine Hill Road." I felt my stomach drop. For a second, I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at him through the open window, my brain trying to rationalize it. Maybe he'd seen my license plate before, or maybe he knew someone I knew. There had to be an explanation. "How do you know where I live?" I finally asked. He tilted his head slightly, as if the question confused him. Then he smiled, small and almost apologetic. "You offered me a ride last time," he said. Last time? I'd never seen him before in my life. Before I could say anything else, he reached for the door handle. My first instinct was to lock the doors, but something, curiosity, stupidity, I don't know, made me freeze. The door opened with a click, and the smell of damp air and metal drifted in. He slid into the seat beside me, closed the door gently, and set his backpack on the floor. His movements were slow, deliberate, like someone who's done the same thing 100 times before. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The car's heater hummed softly, fog curling around the windshield like smoke. Then he turned his head toward me and said, almost conversationally, "You always drive this way home." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Do I know you?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just looked out the window as if watching something moving in the trees. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Not yet." That's when I noticed his hands. Pale. Cold-looking. Not shaking from the cold, just still. Too still. I thought about pulling over, telling him to get out. But the fog was thick, and the idea of stepping outside with him there alone, in that silence, felt worse than keeping him in the car. So I drove. The miles crawled by. Neither of us spoke. The only sound was the wiper blades scraping rhythmically across the glass. Every now and then, I'd glance at him. He was always looking forward, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. Then, just as the road curved toward the Asheville turnoff, he said something that made my skin crawl. "You should slow down," he murmured. "Why?" "Because there's a deer up ahead. You don't want to hit it." I instinctively tapped the brakes, more out of surprise than belief. And then, seconds later, a deer burst out of the trees, right in front of the car. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching. The deer froze in the headlights for a heartbeat, then vanished into the woods. My chest heaved. My hands were slick with sweat. I turned to him, words tangled in my throat. "How did you?" But the seat beside me was empty. The door was still closed. His backpack was gone. And in the fogged-up glass of the passenger window, written in a single line of clear space, were the words, "See you at home." When I finally pulled into my driveway that night, my hands were still trembling. I must have looked like hell, eyes wide, pale, gripping the steering wheel like I was afraid the car would vanish if I let go. The first thing I did was turn on every light in the house. The living room, the kitchen, even the hallway lamps. I wasn't going to sit in the dark, not after what had just happened. The silence inside was almost unbearable. It was too still, too perfect, like the whole house was holding its breath. I remember checking the locks, front door, back door, garage, all secure. Then I went to the kitchen window and peered outside, half expecting to see that pale figure standing at the edge of the yard, waiting. But the driveway was empty. The fog still clung to the trees, glowing faintly in the porch light, but there was no movement. No sound. I told myself I'd imagined it. That exhaustion, darkness, and caffeine had finally scrambled my brain. People hallucinate when they're overtired, right? That had to be it. And yet, there was something about that voice, the calm certainty of it. "See you at home." The phrase looped in my head as I showered, changed into sweats, and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The warmth helped, but only a little. I sat on the couch, stared at the muted TV, and kept glancing toward the window, waiting for headlights that never came. By the time I finally dozed off, the clock on the wall read 3:17 a.m. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the blinds. Morning light. Ordinary, peaceful. The kind of light that makes the previous night feel like a dream. For a moment, I almost believed it had been. Then I saw the footprints. They started near the front door, muddy prints on the hardwood floor. Bare footprints. Each one clear, wet, leading across the living room toward the hallway. My first thought was that I'd forgotten to wipe my shoes after coming in, but the prints were too big, too flat. They weren't mine. And they stopped right in front of the hallway mirror. The glass was fogged, like someone had breathed on it. My reflection was blurred and warped by the condensation. I wiped it with my sleeve, and for a split second, I swore I saw another face behind mine, just a flicker, pale and unfamiliar, gone the instant I blinked. That was when I called the police. The officer who showed up was young, looked barely 23. He took one look at the footprints, the mirror, and the open bottle on the counter, and I could tell what he was thinking. "You're sure no one's been in the house?" he asked. "Positive," I said. "I live alone." He nodded slowly, scribbling notes. "No forced entry. Could be condensation, maybe from the shower. Mud could have been tracked in yesterday and dried weird overnight." I almost told him about the hitchhiker, about how the man had known my name, my address, but something stopped me. It sounded insane, even in my own head. I didn't want to see that look in his eyes, the one that says this guy needs a shrink, not a cop. So I thanked him, let him check the doors, and after he left, I stood there in my empty living room, staring at those fading footprints until they disappeared completely. That day dragged on forever. Work felt impossible. My hands shook every time my phone buzzed, half expecting an unknown number, a voice saying my name again. I kept glancing toward the parking lot outside my office window, searching for anyone watching. Nothing. When I drove home that evening, the sun had already dipped behind the trees. The air felt colder than usual, and the fog was back, thicker, heavier, rolling low across the road like smoke from an unseen fire. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to convince myself it was just weather. Halfway home, my headlights flickered. Not dimmed, flickered, like something passed in front of them. Then the radio hissed to life, even though I hadn't touched it since last night. That same whispering static filled the car, sharp and irregular, like someone trying to speak through it. I reached to shut it off, then froze. Under the static, I heard it. My name. Evan. It was faint, distorted, but unmistakable. Evan, you shouldn't have left me. My throat went dry. I slammed the power button, plunging the car into silence. My pulse thundered in my ears. I didn't look in the rear-view mirror. I couldn't. When I reached my driveway, I parked fast and got out, leaving the car door open behind me. The house loomed ahead, porch light flickering. The fog had crept up the hill, wrapping around the fence like fingers. I forced myself up the steps, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Everything was just as I'd left it. The couch, the empty glass, the blanket crumpled on the floor. But as I turned toward the kitchen, I stopped dead. The refrigerator door was open, and inside, wedged between the milk and a carton of eggs, was something that made my stomach turn. A folded piece of paper. My name was written on it in blue ink. My handwriting. I don't remember writing it. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. There was only one sentence written across the page. You offered me a ride last time. My vision swam. I stumbled back, heart pounding, staring at the note like it might move. Then the kitchen light flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The whole house plunged into darkness. And from somewhere behind me, just inches away, I heard a voice, quiet, familiar, almost calm. Thanks for the lift. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? After the lights went out and that voice whispered behind me, I stood frozen in the dark, too afraid to even breathe. The air felt thick, wet, like it had weight, and every hair on my body stood on end. I remember slowly turning toward the sound, my heart hammering in my chest, expecting to see him, the hitchhiker, standing there in the doorway, pale and waiting. But there was no one. Just shadows. The house was silent again, except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I told myself I'd imagined it. That exhaustion was making me hallucinate. So I backed away, groped for my phone flashlight, and flicked it on. The beam cut across the kitchen like a blade. The note was still on the counter. The refrigerator still open. But the space behind me was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was in the room, just out of sight, just beyond the edge of the light. Eventually, I managed to reset the breaker in the basement. The lights came back on one by one, filling the house with a harsh fluorescent glow that somehow made everything worse. It all looked the same, yet wrong. Too bright, too still, like the moment after lightning hits. I tried to distract myself, made coffee, turned on the TV. The news anchor's voice was comforting in a meaningless way. Background noise to drown out the silence. But when I looked at the screen, the broadcast froze for a second, then flickered. And for one frame, barely a blink, there was a different image. A face. White. Blurred. Staring straight at the camera. Then the screen went back to normal, the anchor still talking about weather fronts and traffic accidents, like nothing had happened. I shut the TV off and stood there in the quiet hum of the house, heart pounding, watching my reflection in the blank screen. That's when I heard the sound again. From the hallway. At first, it was faint, a slow, rhythmic tapping like someone dragging their fingertips along the wall. Then it grew louder, moving steadily toward me. Tap, tap, tap. It stopped right outside the living room doorway. Who's there? I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. No answer. I took one step forward. The air turned colder, my breath misting in front of me. Then came the whisper. Evan. My name, right beside my ear. I spun around, nearly dropping the phone. Nothing. Empty space. And yet, I felt him there. Not like a presence in the room, but inside the air itself. Like the space had changed density, thicker, heavier. The tapping started again. Only now it was behind me. I backed away toward the front door, hands shaking so bad I could barely keep hold of my keys. I wanted to leave, to run outside and not look back, but when I reached the handle, it wouldn't turn. The lock was jammed. That's when every door in the house slammed shut at once. The sound was so loud it shook the picture frames on the wall. I dropped the keys, staggered backward, trying to understand what was happening. Then I saw something move in the reflection of the hallway mirror. A figure, standing at the far end, half hidden in shadow. He was turned slightly to the side, his face pale and unfamiliar, eyes hollow like they'd been burned out. His jacket was torn. Wet. I couldn't see his feet. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then he raised his hand, slowly, and pressed his palm flat against the glass. I stared at it, frozen, and that's when I noticed the mud. The same brown smudge that had been on my floor that morning. The glass began to fog around his handprint, spreading outward in small bursts of condensation until words began to form, letters traced into the mist from the other side. You didn't stop last time. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. No, I whispered. I did. I did stop. The word smudged, then changed. Not soon enough. And then he was gone. The mirror cleared, showing only my terrified reflection staring back. I don't remember falling, but suddenly I was on the floor, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. I crawled toward the front door, grabbed the keys, and yanked it open so hard it cracked the frame. Cold night air rushed in, carrying fog through the doorway like smoke. I bolted outside, down the porch steps, into the driveway. But the fog was everywhere now, so thick I could barely see the car. The world had gone silent again. Even the crickets had stopped. Then, through the mist, I saw a shape. A person standing at the edge of the yard. Still. Facing me. The same jacket. The same stance. It was him. I took a step back toward the porch. What do you want? I shouted. The fog swallowed the sound instantly. But his voice came back, low and distant, from everywhere at once. You promised me a ride home. My heart stopped. He began to move forward, slowly, silently, his figure fading in and out with the fog, like a signal flickering on and off. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then, as he reached the edge of the driveway, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification. When I pulled it out, my screen lit up with a new message. Unknown number. I'm here. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. Exactly the same minute I'd picked him up 2 nights ago. I looked up and he was gone. The fog cleared just enough to show the empty road stretching into darkness. But my car door was open, and in the driver's seat, smeared across the inside of the windshield, were the same muddy handprints. I didn't go back inside that night. I sat in my car with the engine running until the first hint of dawn burned through the fog. I kept the headlights on the empty road, half expecting him to step out again. He never did. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself that if I could just understand who he was, I could stop whatever this was. Logic. Evidence. That's how I've handled everything else in my life. Measure, analyze, fix. So I drove straight to the county records office. The woman behind the desk gave me a tired smile when I asked about accidents on Route 47. Plenty, she said, tapping at her keyboard. You'll have to narrow it down. Last few years, I said. Anyone found near mile marker 22? Her expression changed slightly, something like recognition. She clicked a few times, then frowned. Yeah. There was a fatality 2 years ago. Pedestrian struck on a foggy night. Driver never reported it until morning. My stomach clenched. Did they ever find out who the driver was? She shook her head. Anonymous tip. No one charged. But the victim was a guy named Daniel Grayson. 26. Backpack found at the scene. Backpack. I thanked her, took down the details, and sat in the parking lot staring at the paper. Daniel Grayson. The name meant nothing, yet it felt familiar, like something half-remembered from a dream. I searched my phone, scrolling through old emails, old job reports. And then I saw it. A project from 2 years ago. A collapsed footbridge near Greenwood. One of the inspection assistants on site had been Daniel Grayson. He'd quit after only a week. I barely remembered him. My pulse quickened. Could it be the same person? I found an archived article online. A grainy photo showed a young man in a dark jacket, standing by that same bridge. Same face. Same eyes. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the phone screen dimmed. That's when my car radio turned itself on. Static hissed through the speakers, then a faint voice under it, distorted but clear enough to make my blood run cold. "Why didn't you stop?" I slammed the power off, grabbed my phone, and got out of the car. The air outside was still, heavy with heat. No fog now, just that thick, oppressive quiet. I needed to get home. The house looked different in daylight, smaller, ordinary. But when I stepped inside, the smell hit me. Damp earth and something metallic, faint but sharp. I followed it to the living room. The floorboards by the window were wet. Not soaked, just enough to darken the wood in long, thin streaks, like footprints that had bled upward through the floor. I knelt down and touched one. Cold. Suddenly, the air behind me shifted. A soft creak from the hallway. Then another. "Daniel?" I whispered, the name tasting strange on my tongue. No answer. Only a faint echo, like someone repeating the word from far away. I turned. Every picture frame on the wall was tilted. Each one, slightly off-center, as if someone had walked by and brushed a hand against them. The mirror at the end of the hall was fogged again. Words were forming on it, faint and shaky, as if written by a trembling hand. "You saw me." I stepped closer. My reflection swam behind the letters, distorted by moisture. "Saw you when?" I whispered. The next line appeared, slower this time. "When the bridge fell." My chest tightened. Memories flashed, chaotic images from that day, the cracked foundation, the collapsed railing, the chaos afterward. A figure standing near the edge, waving for help as water rushed beneath the wreckage. We'd thought everyone got out. I remember turning my truck onto Route 47 that evening, exhausted, rain pelting the windshield, thinking about how close I'd come to disaster. And then no, I'd driven past someone that night. A silhouette in the downpour, arm raised. I'd assumed it was a trick of the rain. I hadn't stopped. My knees gave out. I gripped the doorframe, staring at the message on the mirror as a low hum filled the hallway. It started as vibration under my feet, then rose through the walls, a resonance like wind trapped in a tunnel. The bulbs above me flickered, brightened, then burst with a sharp pop. In the strobe of dying light, I saw him again, standing at the other end of the hallway, water dripping from his hair, his clothes torn and slick with mud. He looked younger than I remembered. Or maybe that's just how ghosts look, like the last version of themselves that ever knew peace. "I didn't know," I said, voice shaking. "I swear to God, I didn't know you were there." He tilted his head slightly, water running down his face like tears. "You kept driving," he said. His voice was hollow, but not angry, just certain. I can help you," I stammered. "I'll tell someone I'll." He stepped closer. The floorboards groaned beneath him, but there was no sound of footsteps. "You already did," he said. The lights went out. For a moment, total blackness. Then faint illumination returned, a dull glow seeping from the cracks in the floor, as if the house itself had started breathing light. From somewhere beneath me came the muffled sound of dripping water. Slow. Measured. Drip. Drip. I forced myself to look down. Thin lines of moisture were threading up through the boards, curling toward my shoes. The smell of river mud filled the air. Then the whisper returned, close enough that I felt it in my ear. "Take me home." Everything went silent. And then, from outside, my car engine started. I ran to the window. The driver's seat was empty, but the headlights were on, glaring through the fog that was somehow back again, rolling low across the lawn. The engine idled for a few seconds, then the passenger door swung open by itself. Inviting. Waiting. I didn't move. I couldn't. The radio came alive inside the car, soft static at first, then a voice, unmistakably mine, saying quietly, "Let's go for a drive." The car engine purred in the driveway, like it was waiting for me. I stood at the window, staring at the empty driver's seat glowing under the dash lights, the open passenger door breathing cold air into the night. It was absurd to think a car could beckon, but that's exactly how it felt. The fog drifted around it in slow circles, almost like it was alive, curling toward the house, reaching. My first thought was to run. My second was that there was nowhere to run from this. The voice on the radio, the one that sounded like mine, had said, "Let's go for a drive." I opened the front door. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and metallic. My breath clouded in front of me as I walked down the steps. The gravel crunched under my shoes, muffled by the thick fog. The car lights flared brighter as I approached. When I reached the driver's side, the door unlocked with a soft click, even though I hadn't touched the handle. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of wet earth. The seat felt damp. The key wasn't even in the ignition, yet the engine idled smoothly, humming a low, steady rhythm that vibrated up through the steering wheel. The radio crackled. "Evan," the voice said. "Not mine this time. His." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "What do you want?" A faint hiss then. "To finish the ride." The headlights flickered. The gear shift moved by itself into drive. The car began to roll forward. I grabbed the wheel on instinct, heart pounding, ready to slam the brakes, but they didn't respond. The pedal went all the way down and stayed there. The road ahead was swallowed in fog. The world outside the headlights ceased to exist. We passed the first turn, then the second. My hands gripped the wheel tight, but it was like the car had its own mind. "You saw me," the voice whispered through the static. "You kept driving." I shook my head. "I didn't know it was you, Daniel. I didn't even see." "You saw enough." The fog thickened. Shadows moved through it, flickers of faces, outlines of things that shouldn't have been there. For a moment, I thought I saw myself standing on the side of the road, thumb raised, pale eyes staring back. "Please," I said. "I didn't mean to leave you there." The voice softened. "But you did." The radio clicked off. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. The car slowed, the headlights dimming until I could barely see the road. Then, faintly, through the mist, I saw it. Mile marker 22. The place where I'd picked him up, or thought I had. The car stopped on its own. The engine went quiet. For a moment, all I could hear was the ticking of the cooling metal. Then I saw him, standing in the middle of the road, the fog curling around his legs. The same jacket, the same hollow expression. Only now his eyes weren't empty. They were filled with light, a soft white glow like reflection on water. "Daniel," I said quietly. He tilted his head. "You left me here." My throat tightened. "I didn't know. I thought you made it out. I didn't know anyone was still." The fog pulsed, swirling faster, and I caught glimpses of movement within it. Twisted railings, broken boards, water rushing. The bridge. He took a step closer. The world seemed to bend with him, the air rippling like heat above asphalt. "You heard me," he said. "You looked right at me." "I couldn't stop," I whispered. The road was slick, the rain. "You chose not to stop." The temperature dropped. My breath came out in thick clouds. The windshield began to frost from the inside, veins of ice spreading across the glass. "Please," I said. "What do you want me to do?" He raised his hand and pointed behind me. I turned. The passenger seat was no longer empty. His backpack sat there, soaked and muddy. The zipper slowly slid open by itself. Inside was a phone. Cracked. Caked in dried mud. The screen lit up. Video found play. My fingers shook as I tapped the screen. The image was shaky, rain hammering against glass. It showed the inside of a car, mine. I was behind the wheel, squinting through the windshield. Headlights flashed across a figure on the road, soaked, waving desperately. Me on that night 2 years ago. The camera tilted, showing my hands gripping the wheel. The wipers smearing water in frantic streaks. Then, through the glass, a glimpse of that same pale face illuminated by my headlights, Daniel's face, before the camera jolted violently. A sound, metal on metal, a dull thud, then darkness. The video cut off. My vision blurred. My hands went cold. No, I whispered. That's not. I stopped. The radio flared back to life, loud, filled with static and a voice half buried beneath it. You didn't stop, Evan. You left me under the bridge. The world outside the car began to dissolve. The trees bent inward, swallowed by fog. The road ahead shimmered, edges fading like old film. The passenger door opened with a slow, deliberate creak. He stood there again, right beside the car. His face close now, water dripping from his hair onto the seat. You promised me a ride, he whispered. Then, quietly, almost tenderly, he added, It's your turn. The fog surged into the car like a living thing, filling every space, wrapping around my arms, my throat, pulling me backward. I gasped for air, reaching for the door handle, but my hand passed right through it. Through the mist, I heard the engine start again. The last thing I saw before everything went white was Daniel sitting in the driver's seat, looking straight ahead, calm, his hands on the wheel. And me, reflected in the passenger window, mouth open in a silent scream, as the car rolled forward into the fog. They found the car at dawn. It was parked on Route 47, right beside mile marker 22. Engine cold, doors unlocked, headlights still faintly glowing. No sign of struggle, no broken glass, no footprints leading away from it. Just silence. Deputy Hall was the first on scene. He'd driven that road hundreds of times, but he said later he almost didn't see the car at all. The fog was thick that morning, so thick his high beams did nothing but paint the mist in blinding white. When he finally stepped out, he noticed something odd right away. The car wasn't dusty from the night air. It was wet, beaded with fresh condensation, like it had just come up out of the river. Inside, the driver's seat was empty. The passenger seat, though, was soaked. Mud caked into the fabric, small leaves stuck to the console, a faint smell of stagnant water clinging to the air. Hall opened the glove box, found Evan's wallet and ID. Everything intact. Then he noticed the phone sitting on the dashboard. The screen was on. A single video file, time-stamped at 11:47 p.m., the same minute every strange thing in this story had begun. He played it once and never again. The footage showed a dark road, headlights slicing through fog. The camera jostled, focused on the passenger window. Outside, through the glass, a pale figure walked alongside the car, keeping pace. Then the view swung toward the driver's seat for an instant. Evan's reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes wide, whispering something no one could make out. Then the screen went black. The report would later list the case as a missing person, presumed dead. But everyone who'd ever driven Route 47 knew that wasn't the whole story. 3 days later, Hall went back. He said it was for closure, though his wife told him not to. The fog was back that morning, thicker than he'd ever seen it. He parked at the shoulder, right where the car had been found. The silence was complete. No birds, no wind, not even the usual hum of crickets from the woods. He walked the edge of the road, scanning the ditches for tire marks, footprints, anything. Instead, he found something half buried in the mud. A cracked phone, waterlogged, its screen dark. He turned it over. The name, Daniel Grayson, was etched faintly into the back. When he looked up again, he saw a figure in the fog, standing exactly where mile marker 22 used to be. Hall blinked, and it was gone. He never mentioned it in his report. But after that day, he stopped driving that route altogether. I wish that was the end of the story. But of course, it isn't. Because a week later, around midnight, a man named Oliver Kent was driving home from a late shift in Greenwood. He told his girlfriend later that the fog rolled in fast, like a wall. The air turned cold. His radio started cutting in and out. He thought he saw something ahead, someone walking along the shoulder. A man in a dark jacket, thumb pointed out. Oliver slowed. The man turned toward the car. Couldn't see him clearly, Oliver said later. But he looked wet, like he'd been standing in the rain for hours. He almost stopped. Almost. But something about the way the hitchhiker moved, too still, too slow, made him hit the gas instead. As he drove past, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was gone. What Oliver did see, though, what he swore to afterward, was a second figure sitting in his back seat for a split second. A man with hollow eyes, pale and familiar. Watching him. Then nothing. They say Route 47 isn't used much anymore. Locals take the longer way around. Truckers refuse it after dark. But sometimes on foggy nights, drivers report strange things, faint static creeping through their radios, the feeling of a passenger seat dipping slightly under unseen weight, headlights dimming as if swallowed by mist. And every so often, someone sees a man walking the shoulder. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with another figure beside him. Both with faces pale as moonlight, moving in perfect step. And if you're unlucky enough to meet their eyes, they say you'll hear it too, that soft whisper from the passenger side window. Let's go for a drive.